All right, here we go. Today we have former arms dealer David Packouz, who at just 25 years old secured a $300 million U.S. government contract to supply the Afghan army with 100 million rounds of AK-47 ammunition, rockets, and other munitions during President Bush's war on terror. David's story was depicted in the 2016 film War Dogs, starring Jonah Hill and Miles Teller. David's character was actually played by Miles. So David, welcome to Vlad TV.
Thank you.
Very interesting story. So I want to start at the very beginning. You were born in St. Louis.
Yes.
And 9 kids.
Yeah, I'm one of 9, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you grew up in an Orthodox Jewish household.
I have. Cue all the anti-Semitic comments. Go for it.
Okay.
I see a lot of those. But yeah, my dad was actually a rabbi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And your former partner, you actually met in the synagogue.
Yeah, our families went to the same synagogue, and we didn't go to the same school, but our families went to the same synagogue, so we'd sneak out during prayers because neither of us liked to pray, so that's kind of how we got to know each other.
We're talking about Ephraim Devaroli.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys stay friends, you go through high school, you get into the college time of your life, and what are you doing at this point?
So yeah, I was going to college. I was studying chemistry. I've always been like a bit of a science nerd, and I was working part-time as a massage therapist. That part of the movie is true. Mm-hmm. And I had a few side businesses as well besides that to make money while I was in college. I was importing SD cards from China, selling them on eBay. I was importing bed sheets and towels from Pakistan and selling them to hospitals and nursing homes. And so when we had lost touch with each other around that time, I hadn't seen him in a few years because he had gone off to work for his uncle in LA. His uncle owned this big pawn shop. And so when Ephraim was like 16, he had gotten kicked out of school for smoking weed. And so his parents sent him off to work for his uncle. And his uncle was doing government contracting, selling things to the government. And his uncle also sold guns in the pawn shop. So Ephraim became kind of obsessed with guns, became a bit of a gun nut, learned how to do the government contracting, worked for his uncle for like a couple years. Then they had a falling out. They each claimed the other screwed the other. They both have terrible reputations, so I believe them both.
Okay.
But then when they had their falling out, Ephraim came back to Miami to start his own company, and AEY Inc. And he worked on his own for about a year, and then we bumped into each other at a mutual friend's house.
Okay, AEY stands for what?
So it does stand for something. It's actually the initials of his. So his dad incorporated that corporation, used it as like a label printing business. Wasn't really active by the time Ephraim took it over. So his dad incorporated it, and the letters stand for the initials of his 3 sons' names. So cool. The E in AEY is Ephraim, and so it's Avrami, Ephraim, Yeshaya is what it stands for.
Okay, now Ephraim comes from a family that were selling arms in one way or another.
His uncle was.
His uncle.
Yeah.
Was. Well, and also his dad was selling like Kevlar jackets.
Yeah, he was selling the accessories. He wasn't doing any weapons or anything like that.
But it's all kind of the same family.
Yeah, so his dad got into the business, I believe, through his uncle. And his uncle got into it because of the pawn shop, and like the local cops would come by and buy stuff from him, and they told him, hey, if you want to like sell on larger scale to the department, you have to go through the government contracting system.
So how did you get involved with AEY?
So when I bumped into Ephraim after a few years of not seeing him while he was out in LA, he asked me what I was doing, and I told him about the SD cards and the bed sheets and the towels that I was importing. And he says to me, he's like, oh, that's really interesting. A lot of the things you're doing, that skill set that you have, looking for suppliers overseas, arranging shipping, financing, licensing, etc., that could all be applied to the business I'm in, government contracting. But I bet I'm making way more money than you, so why don't you come and work with me? We could make more money together. And I asked him, I thought I was doing pretty well for myself. I was making a lot more money than all my friends at the time. So I asked him, well, how much money you made? And he's like, I'm going to tell you, but only to inspire you. I'm not bragging, okay? He opens up his laptop and he logs into his bank account and he shows me he has $1.8 million in the bank, in his own bank account. And I knew I know his family. I know his parents didn't give him that money. So I was like, wow, this guy's made like almost $2 million in 1 year. That's a lot more than I've been making. So I told him, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Teach me what you know. That's how it started.
Okay, so now you've joined up with AEY.
Yes.
Now, do you guys have some sort of agreement in place?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we started out working on a 50-50 basis that we would split the profits 50-50. And the idea was that I would come in and do stuff that he wasn't focused on. So I wouldn't do like the weapons or the ammo or anything like that because that was his thing. He was mostly focused on that. So I would come in and do other fields to expand the business. So I started out focusing on fuel. And my first contract that I won was I won it about 2 to 3 weeks in after starting to work with him. And it was for 40,000 gallons of propane. I delivered to the U.S. Air Force in Wyoming to a base over there. And I made, I think between the two of us, after we split it 50-50, I made like $8,000 off that.
Okay. Did you guys have a written contract or was it a handshake deal?
In the beginning, it was a handshake deal. Okay. And then later, we ended up getting, after he kept on trying to renegotiate, then we ended up getting a written contract. Right. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
But, it just goes to show it's a good idea to have a written contract
100%.
when you start.
Yes.
Because when it gets crazy later on, it's hard to get that contract later on.
Yeah, everyone is friends before there's money to fight over.
Right. Okay, now with AEY, when you look at businesses in general, they try to get as many customers as possible.
Yes.
But AEY is a little bit different because they just focused on one customer.
Correct.
And that customer is?
The U.S. federal government.
Exactly, the Defense Department.
Yeah, not just the Defense Department. We bid on contracts for all branches of government. We sold to the State Department, to the Veterans, Department of Veterans Affairs. But the entire federal government is massive. It's the biggest single customer in the world. They spend over like $7 trillion a year. It's insane.
Now, the thing about the way this works is interesting, especially from someone who isn't in this business. So when it comes to any contract, like the Pentagon needs to buy something and they want to spend whatever. They have a $100 million budget and they need to get a whole bunch of planes and a whole bunch of bazookas and missile launchers, whatever else.
Yeah.
They have to open it to the public.
Correct.
They can't just go to the company they're used to.
Yes.
So that gave AEY a chance to actually bid on everything in a way.
Yes. So yeah, most contracts are required by law to be out for open bid. That means anyone who's registered with the government to do business with the federal government can submit a bid. Now they have some requirements depending on the contract. So above a certain level of money, you need to have some experience that you can prove that you've done this kind of business before. But anything under these days, it's $250,000. There's no prior experience required. So past performance, they call it. So you can win a $250,000 contract with the federal government being a brand new business.
Wow.
With zero experience.
No experience, no resume, no references.
Correct.
Nothing.
Because they want to encourage new businesses to come in and sell to the government. So they actually give some preference to new businesses because they want to increase the competition. The idea is that long term, there's going to be, the more competitors there are in the field of government contracting, the better of a deal the government's going to get.
Well, right. And if you talk about the Pentagon alone, they spend billions.
Yeah, about $800 billion. Well, in total. Yeah.
$800 billion.
Yes, that's their budget.
That's
per year. Yeah.
Per year?
Per year, $800 billion. Yeah, that's the entire Pentagon budget. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's massive.
$800 billion a year on weapons.
Yeah, it's about 10 times more than like the next 5 biggest countries combined. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And if you guys just get a small sliver of that, that's millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. Hundreds of millions. That can be, yeah.
Okay. And the thing about, when you put in these bids, you don't actually have to even make this stuff yourself.
Correct.
You just have to somehow procure it from somewhere in order to successfully do the deal with them.
Correct.
So you could say, sure, I'll give you a tank. And then you have to go scurry and find the tank, pretty much, right?
As long as you can get the supplies, that's all they care about. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys start bidding. And in order to get some of this stuff, well, I mean, here's the thing. In order to get the bid, to win the bid, you have to underbid everyone else.
Correct.
And if you get that, then you then have to produce the stuff.
Yes.
Now, to get the stuff, you have to sort of go outside the country and deal with very shady characters, to say the least.
Right.
War criminals, soldiers of fortune, crooked politician, gangsters, mafia guys in the various countries and so forth. So when you guys first started getting these contracts, what was it like to sort of go out there and start dealing with these guys?
Well, at the time, the federal government the Pentagon was trying to build up the Iraqi and Afghani states, right? So we had gone in there and we bombed them and invaded and destroyed Saddam Hussein and the Taliban. And the idea was that the United States would now build them up as democratic countries. That was the plan. And part of that, they need to build up their police force and their military so that they can defend themselves and have order in their country so that the United States could eventually pull out. And those countries, they're used to dealing with Warsaw Pact weapons, which is different from the NATO weapons that the West uses. So the United States, part of NATO, we use the M16 as the primary assault rifle, uses 5.56 ammo, and the Warsaw Pact countries, they use the AK-47, which uses 7.62 by 39, which is different ammunition, not intercompatible. Now, the United States doesn't really manufacture much of the Warsaw Pact weapons or ammo. So when they wanted to supply the Afghanis and the Iraqis with this type of ammo and these type of weapons, they had to find middlemen like us to go out there and find sources of supply, which is mostly from the former Soviet Union countries. Now, those countries tend to be run by crooked politicians and mafiosos. So when you try to do business with people in those countries, that's kind of how you end up, who you end up dealing with. We didn't seek out shady characters. They just happened to be in that business. So what we would do is we'd start off on the internet and we'd look through trade directories. So Jane's is a very famous trade directory where you can actually look and see all the companies that are officially registered out there that sell these types of munitions and weapon systems. And we would contact them by email, by fax. Back then they were using a lot of fax. We try to call them when they wouldn't respond to us. They weren't great at customer service, these people. They're more used to the Soviet mentality that, when you're calling them, you're bothering them. But eventually, with persistence, we would get through and we'd ask them for a quote. And that's how we would make contact. We would also go to trade shows and meet them in person so that they would take us seriously and respond to our emails and our faxes. And so that's how we started building up our network. And of course, we would ask for references from people we knew when we were looking for anything particular that they couldn't help us with. So those are the main strategies we used to deal with to build up our sources of supply. And the more sources you have, the more competitive you are, and the more likely you are to win the contract. So we were obsessed with pretty much getting every single source for these kinds of things that we were looking to buy that was possible, that was out there.
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, it was an interesting time when you guys got into it because there was two wars that were happening at the same time, Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
Bush takes office.
Yeah.
And military contracts just went crazy.
Yeah.
So in 2001, military contracts were 145 billion.
Yeah.
In 2008, it was 390 billion.
Yeah.
And these days it's 800 billion.
Yeah, just keeps climbing.
So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. These are massive numbers.
Yeah, enormous. Yeah.
Okay. So now you have all this money that needs to be spent.
Yeah.
And you're building up your contacts. Now, during this early time, were you having any kind of crazy situations dealing with these guys? Trying to buy weapons overseas?
Well, we didn't have any crazy situations at first. That just kind of came later. There were a few situations where I thought that that Ephraim was doing things that made me uncomfortable, that I didn't think he should be doing. Like he was trying to source a whole package of attack helicopters and heavy machine guns for the king of Nepal. He called it the Save the King package because the king was facing down pro-democracy protests and wanted to suppress the protests. And so Ephraim was trying to supply him with that, and I thought that was kind of messed up and probably illegal. Luckily for Ephraim, I would say, and for the people of Nepal, that they ended up making like a deal with the king so that the protests eventually ended, and before it had to get violent. But yeah, I mean, that obviously made me very uncomfortable and very concerned, and made me start to second guess whether I should be doing business with him because he would be willing to do these kinds of things.
Well, yeah, but in general, though, you take that situation out, you are, brokering guns and ammunition that are used to kill people.
Yes, but we were selling it to the U.S. federal government, and so I felt like I was pretty much at the same moral liability as someone who joins the military, right? I mean, they're pulling the trigger.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying,
Yeah, but I'm saying, but compared to supplying someone like the king of Nepal, who is using those weapons to suppress a pro-democracy protest, I think that's very different than supporting the U.S. military. I do see myself as a patriot, and I fully support the United States. I don't think we do everything correctly all the time, of course, and I think we should all vote with our conscience. But I don't see anything wrong with supporting the U.S. Defense Department.
2006, you and Ephraim go to Eurosatori,
which
is a big trade show in Paris.
Yes.
And you meet someone important there.
Yeah.
That is?
Heinrich Thomé, or in the movie, he's played by Bradley Cooper.
Right.
Yeah, he's a Swiss arms dealer.
So what happens after you guys meet him?
Well, it wasn't the first time we met him, actually. We actually did meet him for the first time in Vegas about 6 months before that. And we had been doing business with him over the phone. We had been introduced to him from our investor, Ralph, who in the movies played by this Jewish laundromat owner, but in real life, his name is Ralph. He's actually Mormon and owns a machine gun factory based in Utah, and Ralph Merrill. And so he had introduced us to Henry, and we'd been sourcing things through Henry. We hadn't met him in person though until I think it was February of 2006 in Vegas, and then we met him again in Eurosatori in Paris. And he was just like one of the most connected guys in the industry. I mean, he knew everybody, especially in the Balkans and in Eastern Europe. He was even connected with Russia. Not that we could do business with Russia because they were on a blacklist, but he knew everybody, and he got us incredible prices on everything that we were bidding on. And eventually, for the Afghan contract, he's the one who connected us with the Albanian connection.
Well, Thomé was like a real life Lord of War.
Yeah, he was. He is. He's still around.
Oh, he's still around?
As far as I know, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He had shell companies everywhere.
Yeah.
So you couldn't really tell who was buying what, from where, from how. But he was also investigated. Mm-hmm. For example, Amnesty International investigated him for smuggling arms out of Zimbabwe, which was a U.S. sanctioned violation.
Right.
He's under investigation by U.S. law enforcement for shipping weapons from Serbia to Iraq.
Right.
He was on the watch list by the State Department.
Yeah.
Basically, connecting yourself to him was a big red flag if you're working with America.
So he had been investigated, but he was never actually convicted. This guy always managed to escape getting caught. So I don't know, obviously, I don't know what he did in real life. I know he was accused of a lot of things, but I don't know, but he had never been actually caught doing the things he was accused of.
Okay.
So a lot of people pointed fingers at him, but they couldn't prove it. I will say that when we bid on the Afghan contract, and we were required to list our sources, who we were getting stuff from, and we listed him. So we informed the Pentagon that we were buying from him, and so they were well aware of who we were doing business with. So yeah, he had been investigated by Amnesty International and a few other organizations, but the Pentagon knew that we were doing business with him, and they still gave us the contract.
Well, yeah, so this contract, on July 28, 2006,
Yep.
they put out a solicitation for non-standard ammunition,
Yep.
which is like a semi-covert operation where they needed a ton of ammunition to prop up the Afghan army.
Correct.
What made this different from a standard contract?
Right. So, well, they call it non-standard ammunition just because it's not NATO caliber. That's the reference. Because the United States military uses NATO systems, so anything that's not NATO systems, they call it non-standard. That's where the name of that contract goes. This contract was by far bigger than anything else that they had done up until this point, and the reason for that was because this was mid-2006, and the Bush administration was worried that the next administration would be a Democrat, because Bush was super unpopular at this time.
Yeah.
And so they were worried that the next president would be a Democrat, and which they were right, Obama was the next president, but they were also worried that the next president would pull out of Afghanistan immediately and kind of leave the Afghans hanging, which they were wrong about. I mean, it took until like 2020 for Biden to eventually complete the pullout. So because of that, because that's what they were worried about, they decided to arm the Afghans to the teeth, like to arm them with enough ammo and weapons so that they could be okay for the next 30 years. That was the plan. And when they were doing this for the Iraqi army, they had split all the requirements up into like a bunch of little parts and got I think 30 different suppliers to supply like little pieces of it. And that became an enormous logistical mess. They had to deal with all these suppliers and it just became a big hassle for them to manage. So they decided instead of doing that, this time they're just gonna have one supplier for everything. And that's why the contract was so enormous. And so we bid on it, and we were by far the lowest bidder. I think eventually they told us that we had underbid the next closest competitor by like $52 million. And
well, yeah. It was a very unique situation because the money was only available for 2 years.
Right.
So they had to spend it quickly.
Yeah, before the end of Bush's term.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was the idea.
And there's no dollar limit posted.
Right. Well, they wanted to know how much they wanted the lowest price, but they wanted like 30 different types of ammo. Yeah.
And the thing about this ammo, and you kind of touched on this already, was it was non-standard U.S. ammo, which is easy to do. This is like, Russian mortars, GP-30 grenades, SVD Druganov sniper rifles, and so forth. And a lot of this stuff was basically on the black market or the gray market, however you want to decide. So the U.S. couldn't directly buy this stuff, or else it'd be like a PR nightmare.
Right.
So they had to go through brokers.
Right.
That's essentially buying illegal stuff.
Yeah.
In a way.
It's illegal. It wasn't completely illegal. As you said, it was more of a gray market than a black market thing.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is a lot of the people who are involved in selling this stuff are kind of shady characters that the U.S. government doesn't want to be seen dealing with directly. Now, these people, like Henry Tomei, they're not necessarily black market because they have not been convicted of anything. They are not necessarily banned, but they do have a lot of negative press around them. So the U.S. Army doesn't want to be seen directly giving them money, and even though it's technically legal, so they would rather have a intermediary between them and all, and also just for purposes of lowering their management hassle. They don't want to deal with 50 different suppliers. They want to deal with one, and it gives them a little bit of separation between them and all the accused mafiosos that are selling the stuff.
Well, you guys put together a contract
Yeah.
for $298 million.
Yeah. That was our final bid
How
price.
much ammunition can you get for $300 million at that point?
Well, it was about 30 different types of munitions. So it was everything from like 9mm pistol rounds, AK-47 assault rifle rounds, to heavy machine gun grenades, anti-aircraft rockets, mortars, and like tank rounds. So it was an enormous shopping list of things. I think the AK-47 rounds, it was like either 100, it was about 100 to 150 million. I think they put it up later on. The grenade, they wanted 1.1 million GP30 grenades, like 70,000 anti-aircraft rockets. So it was an enormous quantity of munitions.
None of which you had at the time.
No, I mean, we had some potential sources for it, but yeah, we didn't own any of it. We were just middlemen.
Okay. This contract ends up getting accepted by the U.S. government.
Yeah.
So almost $300 million.
Yeah.
And you're like 25 at the time.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you heard that they actually accepted your bid?
I couldn't believe it. Honestly, we didn't think that we were going to win. Because we knew we were competing against major defense contractors like General Dynamics, which is a publicly traded multi-billion-dollar defense contractor, was bidding on this contract amongst other companies like ATK Systems. All these multi-billion-dollar corporations were our competitors. And they have like 50, 60 years of past performance and experience. And so we did not think we were going to win, but we had delivered a lot of these items in much, much smaller quantities to Iraq. So we had the past performance. We technically qualified to bid on the contract. So we thought if we technically qualified a bid, we might as well put in a bid and see what happens. But our hopes were actually pretty low. So we were pretty shocked that we actually won the contract.
Well, the contract kind of had two parts. So the first part was a deal for $600,000 worth of grenades and ammunition.
Right.
Then the second part was $49 million in ammunition, which is 100 million rounds of AK ammo.
Right.
And 1 million grenades for rocket launchers.
Right.
That is just an insane amount of ammo.
Yeah. So the way it works is when they give you a $300 million contract, they don't give you an order for the whole thing all at once. They divide it into sections called task orders. And they're only required to give you the first task order, which is why we were actually pretty nervous when our first task order was only $600,000, because we had bid the entire contract based on the assumption that we were going to get the full $300 million. And because Afghanistan is a landlocked country, we had to ship it all in by air freight. And air freight is like 80% of the cost is fuel. So it's very expensive and it fluctuates a lot. And because we were asking for a price for hundreds of aircraft loads rather than just one, we got a very big discount on the air freight. So we were able to bid it really competitively. But if they only gave us that first task order for $600K, that wasn't even enough to fill up like one aircraft. So we would have like lost money on that. And so we weren't sure when they first gave us that first order for that first task order. We're like, well, are they going to give us the rest of it? And we're like, maybe they're just testing us. And so we were like really panicking and we're like, oh crap, we're gonna like lose so much money on this. And then they, like a week later, they gave us the second task order, which was $49 million. And then we're like, okay, they're serious about it. They were just waiting for the money to come in. And then later on, they gave us another task order. So they do it in chunks.
If this deal went through the way you wanted it to, how much would you have made off that $300 million yourself?
We were averaging about a 20% profit margin. Wow. We had bid it on a 9%, but then we renegotiated with our suppliers, and we ended up doing about an average of 20% profit margin. And so we would have, as a company, we would have made about $60 million in profit. And my deal at the time, before Ephraim tried to renegotiate for this particular contract, was that I would get 25% of the profits. We changed it from the 50% that we were doing for other contracts because this was kind of his bread and butter. This was his specialty, and he just needed my help he had like 5 really solid sources, and he wanted me to go find the rest. And so our deal was that I would get 25% of this contract. So I was set personally to make about $15 million.
15 million.
15 million, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, part of the problem is that they wanted Russian ammunition, but you couldn't actually do business with Russia directly.
Correct.
Because they were,
they were on a blacklist.
They're on a blacklist, exactly. Yeah. So you had to try to get Russian ammunition from non-Russian countries.
Correct, yeah.
So how crazy was that?
Yeah, the Russians could have supplied everything. And originally, the army was planning on buying it directly from Russia. But then the Russians ended up selling some nuclear technology to the Iranians, and they got put on a blacklist for that, which meant it was illegal for the U.S. Army to buy it directly from Russia. And so that's why they put it out for open bid. And they knew that there was, other than Russia, there wasn't a single source that could supply the entire contract. And they didn't want to deal with like 50 different countries and all the characters that implied. So that's why they put it out for open bid, to find a middleman like us to go and put the whole bid together.
Well, in terms of this contract, the biggest part of it was AK-47 ammunition.
Yeah. Well, I would say that was the biggest logistical aspect of it. It was actually just about 10% of the value of the contracts, about like $30 million worth was for the AK-47 ammo, but it was by far the biggest shipping hurdle. So AK-47 ammo is it's low value. So just to give you a comparison, we were shipping it in aircraft loads of about 45 tons. And for 45 tons, we could fit about $300,000 worth of ammunition for the AK-47. For the same amount of tons, we could fit about $3 million worth of grenades. So it was about 10 times cheaper, 10 times less money for the weight for the AK-47 ammo. And so this was going to be by far our biggest logistical hassle, and the most aircrafts, and the biggest headache in the contract. But it was actually just 10% of the value of the contract.
Okay, well, when it comes to the AK ammunition, you guys had quotes from different countries, from Hungary, Czech Republic.
Yeah.
But Tomei had a strong connection with Albania.
Correct.
And the government in Albania was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Because they were paranoid over getting attacked. So there was huge piles of ammunition all over the country.
Yeah.
So you guys decided to go with Albania.
Right. Yeah. As you said, the reason that Albania it was actually one of the most armed places per capita on Earth at the time, because during the Cold War they were run by this very paranoid dictator who thought he pulled out of his alliance with the Soviet Union and made an alliance with China because he felt like the Soviets weren't true communists, and the Chinese were thrilled to have an ally in Europe. So they supplied him with an enormous amount of munitions, and he built a network of bunkers all over the country and filled them all up with with ammunition and weapons so that they'd be safe from bombardment, because he thought that the Soviets would invade him, and he also thought that the West would invade him. So the world's two superpowers he thought would invade his tiny little country, and his plan was to have what he called total war, where every man, woman, and child becomes a soldier and everyone fights to the death. That was like that was his plan. So to support that, he built this network of bunkers all over the country and filled them with all the Chinese munitions that he got. And but the war never came. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed, and he had all these munitions were still there. And it got to the point actually that at a certain point the Albanian economy collapsed, and the money was worthless, and so people started using ammunition as currency. So they would take a crate of ammo to the store and buy eggs or milk until they reinstituted the currency during the 90s. At the time, in 2007, Albania was trying to join NATO. And NATO required that one of the requirements for Albania to join was that they get rid of all their old munitions. So they were going to have to pay to dismantle all this stuff. And so they were thrilled to sell it for pretty much any price at all. And Henry had he was friends with the, at the time, the Albanian prime minister's son. So he had a really good connection. with the government of Albania, and he was able to do this deal for us where we would pay I think we were paying like 4 cents a round for the AK-47 ammo. So it was significantly less expensive than anywhere else that we had sources for.
Okay, so you make this deal with the Albanian government to buy millions of rounds of ammunition.
Yeah.
But when you go to actually check out the ammunition, you find out that it had Chinese markings all over it.
Right.
And China was on the blacklist to sell to the U.S. as well.
Right.
So how did you feel when you realized that this huge deal was about to fall apart?
Yeah, we were panicking because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition, directly or indirectly. Yeah. And it said that because there is an arms embargo against China that was put in place in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre. And now this ammunition that was in Albania actually was given to the Albanians in the 70s before China was put on the blacklist. So technically it didn't violate the terms of the embargo, but our contract with the army didn't mention the embargo at all. It just said no Chinese munitions directly or indirectly. So it did violate the terms of our commercial contract with the army. So we knew that unless we got like permission for them to change the contract, this ammunition violated the terms of the contract. And so we were thinking about telling them and saying, hey, can you give us like a waiver? And they probably would have done it in retrospect because it turns out that they knew about the Chinese origin the whole time. We found that out later in court. But at the time, we didn't know that they knew. And so we didn't want to risk us losing a $300 million contract. So we decided to hire an Albanian guy to repackage it and get rid of all the Chinese markings.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you're basically trying to hide the fact that this is from China.
Yes.
Well, as you're going through this process, you find out that Tomei is actually skimming a bunch of money for himself.
Right. Well, we knew he was making money for himself because, I mean, why else would he be in business? But we didn't know how much. And so what Ephraim did was he asked the guy who was doing the repackaging for us of the ammunition, he asked him if he knew anyone in the Albanian Ministry of Defense. Turned out Albania is a very small country and he had a cousin working there. So he had his cousin find out what the Albanian Ministry of Defense was getting paid for the ammunition that we were paying Henry Tomei for. And it turned out that the Albanian Ministry of Defense was getting paid 2 cents a round and we were paying Henry 4 cents a round. So he was like making a 50% profit margin. Now, he probably was paying off the politicians from his end of the deal. We don't know that because obviously he wouldn't tell us that. So he probably wasn't keeping that entire amount of money, but that really pissed off Ephraim. I mean, he was furious that Henry was making such a large profit margin. Now, we were making about 1.5 cents a round on it. So that's what I told him. I'm like, Ephraim, we're making 1.5 cents of profit on it. But that was, I guess, proportionally less because the government was paying us 10.5 cents a round. We had to pay about 5 cents in shipping costs. So there was the financing costs and all that. But Ephraim didn't care. I mean, he was just furious that Henry was making so much money and he wanted to cut him out of the deal.
Right. But what happened, though, at the end?
So Ephraim decides to go to Albania and to try to negotiate with the Albanians directly to cut Henry out of the deal. And the Albanians said, we're not cutting Henry out of the deal. Probably because that's how the politicians were getting their kickbacks. And that's probably why they didn't want to cut him out of the deal. But they told Ephraim, look, we know that you hired this random Albanian guy to do the repackaging for you, and you're probably paying him a decent amount of money. So we know you want a discount on the ammo. Why don't you give us the contract to repackage the ammo? And we'll make money on that, and then we can give you a small discount off the ammo so you can save money. And so Ephraim said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. That guy's fired, you're hired. Let's do that. And he flew back to Miami, and the original packaging guy, the guy who was doing the box guy, we called him, right? Because he owned a cardboard box manufacturing company. He called me up and he said, listen, I got stuck with about $20,000 worth of cardboard boxes that I have nothing to do with now because you guys canceled the contract with me. can you at least buy these boxes from me? And I said, yeah, that makes sense. Let me talk to Ephraim. I'll have him pay you for it. And I told Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, yeah, I don't want to buy the boxes from him. Fuck that guy. He's not going to do anything. That's his problem. We didn't tell him to make all those boxes. And I told Ephraim, like, that's probably a bad idea because he knows everything we're doing and he's going to be really mad about it. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. He's a nobody. Don't worry about it. Fuck that guy. I was like, okay, fine. And that guy, Kosta Trubishka is his name, he got really upset, understandably so. And he decided to call up the New York Times and tell them what we were doing, call up the FBI, tell them what we were doing. So they opened up investigations on us. And about 2-3 months after that, well, before this happened, so about like a few weeks later, Ephraim decided he didn't want to pay me either. He was he told me, he's like, hey, like, David, like, I don't think like you're really pulling your weight around here anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, because everything was going well at this point. We had, once the repackaging operation was going well, we were delivering like 4 aircraft loads a week into Kabul. And he's like, oh, you're not really coming into the office so much anymore. And I said, well, I mean, like, everything's going well. He's like, yeah, but you're not helping me with all these other contracts for Iraq. I said, well, I mean, I work on a contract by contract basis. You want to give me a piece of those contracts? I'll help you. He's like, oh, why should I give you a piece? You didn't help me like win those contracts. And I'm like, then why should I help you deliver them? He's like, oh, because I mean, if those go down, then that takes the Afghan contract with the whole company goes down. That takes the Afghan contract with it. And I said, well, then do you want to give me a piece of the company? And he said, okay, I'll tell you what. He's like, you know what? I own 100% of AEY, and I would never do this for anyone else, but you're like my best friend, and you're a big reason why AEY is where it is today. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you 1% of AEY. And I said, 1%? I'm supposed to get 25% of the Afghan contract, and that's going to make us like 90% of the money in the next few years. So I think I'll stick with my 25%. And he's like, well, how about 0%? Because that's the only offer on the table. Take it or leave it. And I told him, well, go fuck yourself. I'll see you in court. And I walked out.
And I just want to point out,
yeah,
like I said in the beginning, you had no written contract up to that point.
We actually did have a written contract at this point because this was not the first time he tried to renegotiate with me. And at the last time he tried to renegotiate with me, I was like, okay, at this point we're writing this down. And we had a handwritten contract. I tried to scan it in my scanner. It was in my apartment. My scanner was actually broken. And so I put it on my living room table, and I was planning on getting my scanner fixed. And then like 2 days later, the contract disappeared mysteriously. And he was the only person coming to my apartment. So I have to assume that he took it. And it was unfortunately before I could scan it. And my contract disappeared. So we did have a handwritten contract. It was like just not a formal thing done through lawyers or anything like that, but it was a written contract that we both signed. But I felt very stupid. I should have gotten something done way earlier than that through lawyers, and at the very minimum, taking a picture of my contract. It was that's the hard lessons you learn that.
Well, as you guys are shipping this ammunition to Afghanistan, you had a 747 cargo plane with 5 million rounds of AK-47 ammunition. And at one point, the plane actually got seized by the Russians. Right.
Yeah, so what happened there was we had a 747 cargo jet. It was about 100 tons of ammo, about $5 million worth. And it had to stop in the Kyrgyzstani Air Force Base. The U.S. Air Force had an Air Force base that they were renting from the country of Kyrgyzstan, which is right next to Afghanistan. And the jet had to land there to refuel. And when it landed there, we got a call from the shipping agent who had arranged the flight for us. And he said, hey, the Kyrgyzstani government is not letting the jet take off. They say you don't have the proper licenses. And we were like, what are you talking about? We have all the licenses. I mean, the airline would not have taken off from Albania if we didn't. They always make sure you have the proper licenses before they leave. And he's like, well, I don't know what's going on. They're saying that you don't have the proper licenses and they're not letting the jet take off. And they want to charge us like, I think he said something like $500,000 a day in penalties for every day that we have the jet on the tarmac there. I'm like, well, that's insane because we have all the licenses. What are they talking about? So I call up the defense attaché in the U.S. State Department in the embassy, the U.S. State Department embassy in Kyrgyzstan, and he's like the official who's part of the Pentagon, but they have one in every embassy. He's like the go-between between the State Department and the Pentagon. And so I asked the defense attaché, I'm like, what's going on with this plane? We have all the licenses. They're saying we don't have a license. And he's like, okay, let me make some phone calls and I'll get back to you. He calls me up a few hours later and he's like, something really weird's going on. He's like, usually my all my contacts here are great. They always pick up the phone like immediately, but now they're giving me the cold shoulder. They're not like even answering my phone calls. I'm gonna have to do some more digging. A few days go by and he's like, yeah, they're just like ignoring me. And eventually they had to send Robert Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense, over to Kyrgyzstan to see what was going on. And it turned out that the Kyrgyzstanis, they were pretty much using our plane as a way to leverage the U.S. Air Force to pay more in rent for the Air Force base. They wanted to go from like $40 million a year to $80 million a year. And they eventually got it. The U.S. Air Force paid them, and then they released our plane.
Okay. So ultimately, the ammunition got to where it was supposed to go.
Yeah, it took a few weeks, but eventually they released it. Yeah.
Well, you guys ultimately, did you fulfill the whole contract?
No. So we ended up fulfilling. So what happened was about 2 months after Ephraim informed me he didn't want to pay me, and I quit, I got a call from one of the secretaries at the office, and she told me that the feds had raided our office because from the investigation they opened up from the box guy, and there was also another competitor of ours who was saying untrue things about us that caused them to open up an investigation. So they raided the office and they pretty much confiscated all the documents, all the computers, and then they wanted to like interview me. They wanted to talk to me because I had not been working there for a while. My lawyer told me, he's like, well, if you talk to them, then you're cooperating, right? And there's no half cooperating. And you either give them the cold shoulder 100% or you tell them everything. There's no in between. And I told him, and I told him, well, what do you think I should do? And he asked me, he's like, well, why don't you go into your emails and find out what kind of evidence they have against you, right? And I went into my emails, and it turned out that there was a lot of evidence. We had, at first we were like, oh, we're not writing anything in emails, and we were pretty good about that. But then we were like on big time crunches, and there was everyone was on a different time zone, so we were really low on sleep, and eventually somebody sent an email, and we're like, okay, it's already an email, and like Ralph, our investor, sent an email to us with its step-by-step instructions of how to sand Chinese markings off crates, like with pictures of like how to do it. He had tried it out himself, and I don't know why he used actual Chinese markings on crates to try to used the sander to try to get rid of it from the crate. So there was very obvious emails, very obvious evidence for us. And so my lawyer said, well, in this case, I mean, you have to plead guilty because the evidence is rock solid against you. So I talked to the agents and I told them what I knew. And they told me that, we had, while we were doing the raid on the office, we found a to-do list on Ephraim's desk with a bunch of things to do in his handwriting. And one of the items on the to-do list was repackage Chinese ammo. So we knew about the Chinese ammo, but it's a good thing you told us, because if you lie to us, you get 0 credit for cooperating. So you're going to go down even harder. And And they're like, and actually we're not really going for you. You haven't made any money from this. You haven't been working at the company for like 2 months. So since you're cooperating, we're going to do our best not to charge you with anything. We're really just going for Ephraim. And I'm like, great, because I can't afford a lawyer now. I'm dead broke. And because Ephraim hadn't paid me and I'd been living off my savings this whole time, while waiting to get paid. And so then about like 6 months passed and nothing happened. And so I thought, well, maybe they're not even going to do anything about this because and Ephraim kept on delivering, right? He didn't like stop delivering this ammunition. He kept on delivering 4 aircraft loads a week into Afghanistan. And about 6 months later in March of 2008, the New York Times publishes a front page article about us with both of our mugshots on the front page. And they claimed that we were delivering rusty ammunition, low quality stuff that was defective, which was not true. We were delivering, the Army was very satisfied with the quality of the ammunition. There was like one shipment of about 30,000 rounds that they had rejected because there was rust on the ammo. But we didn't get paid for it. And they had put that shipment to like the side of the airport and let it because they didn't want to, they weren't going to ship it back, and there was no ammunition recycling facilities in Afghanistan, so they just put it to the side of the airport. And when the New York Times sent a reporter to go investigate, someone pointed him, oh yeah, that's some of the ammunition that AEY delivered, and so that's the ammunition he took pictures of and ended up on the front page of the New York Times, even though it was like a tiny fraction of a percent of what we had actually delivered. So the way the New York Times portrayed it was that we were delivering rusty, low-quality, defective ammunition and putting our Afghan allies in danger. And so it became this big political scandal. And 2 days after that, then the Army put out a statement. We had no idea this was going on, and they canceled the contract. And then about a week after that, the Justice Department called me up and they're like, hey, or they called my lawyer up and they told him, and they're like, hey, we weren't planning on charging David with anything, but we feel like he was just too involved in the operation for us to reasonably charge Ephraim and not charge him. So we're very sorry, but we're going to have to charge him. And so what they did was they said to me, they're like, look, you were involved in this operation and you delivered 71 aircraft loads of this Chinese origin ammunition. And in each aircraft load, you provided a document. It was called a certificate of conformance. And on the certificate of conformance, it said the type of ammunition, the quantity of ammunition, the year it was manufactured, and the place of origin. And you put the place of origin Albania, but you knew that it was really China. And not only did you know it was China, you had a whole operation to repackage it and hide that it was from China. So this submission of this document with knowingly false information is an act of fraud. And you did this 71 times for each of the aircraft. So that's 71 counts of fraud. And you can get up to 5 years in prison for each one. So you're looking at 355 years in prison, unless you plead guilty. If you plead guilty, as prosecutors, we have the power to combine those 71 acts into one. So the most you're going to do is 5 years, and because you plead guilty, we'll tell the judge, hey, he's a reformed citizen, going to be a good boy from now on, and we're going to recommend to the judge to give you on the low end of the guidelines. So you can get maybe 1 year, maybe just probation, up to the judge, not up to us, but we'll tell the judge to go as easy as possible on you. So that was my choice. Like looking at 355 years, or maybe 1 year, maybe nothing. And of course, I didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer at the time, so I didn't really have an option to even fight him in court, even if that was a good idea, which it wasn't. So I pled guilty, and Ephraim eventually pled guilty as well. He tried to fight him for a little while too, but realized that the evidence was really strong against him, decided to plead guilty. Ralph, our investor, decided to fight them in court, took it all the way, and went through trial twice, actually, because the first trial was a hung jury. And that entire process took 3 years for them to go through the two trials. And they didn't want to sentence us until that trial was over, because they wanted to use the sentencing as leverage against us to make us testify at Ralph's trial, if needed. So we didn't get sentenced for 3 years. Eventually, And during this time, we were out on bond, so we weren't allowed to leave like the Southern District of Florida. They told us, you can't be in the arms business. So my lawyer told me, okay, you're going to have to do everything you can to look as good as possible to the judge. So go back to school, get a job at a nonprofit, do everything to make yourself look good. And so that's what I did. I got a job at a food bank. I went back to school. I decided to switch my major to mechanical engineering. Went back to doing massages because I had to make money. I couldn't be in the arms business and the government contracting business. And eventually I got sentenced to 7 months of house arrest. So I didn't even do any prison time. So I feel very, very lucky. Ephraim, on the other hand, had a much higher tolerance for risk. So he decided to continue doing the arms business under someone else's name. So he got like his latest lackey. After I quit, he replaced me with someone else. He ended up screwing that guy too, replaced that guy. So a few guys later, and that's just what he does. A few guys later, he had this guy set up a company under his own name, and he was doing business through that guy's company. Now that guy was, talking on the phone. Ephraim's like a real control freak. So when his lackey was doing negotiations, he would grab the phone and start, he's like, oh, I'm one of the investors, and he'd start doing the negotiations himself. So the guy he was trying to do business with, this gun dealer in like Central Florida, realized who he was, and he saw in the newspapers that he had pled guilty, and he figured, hey, maybe this guy's trying to entrap me into doing something illegal to get some time off his own sentence. And so he's like, I'm not going to fall for that. So he calls up the ATF and tells them, hey, I've got this convicted gun dealer trying to do this deal with me. What should I do? And the ATF is like, oh, that's really interesting. Why don't you have one of our undercover agents introduce him to Ephraim as your business partner? So this guy introduces the undercover ATF agent to Ephraim, and the undercover ATF agent tells Ephraim, he's like, listen, I'm the kind of guy that needs to look you in the eye and shake your hand in order to do a deal, knowing that Ephraim can't leave the Southern District of Florida, and he's in Central Florida, so he would have to violate his bond to go meet him. And so Ephraim's like, yeah, I'm the same way. This is how real men do business, he's like, I'll tell you what, I'll be up there on this coming weekend. And he drives up to meet the undercover ATF agent. Undercover ATF agent knows that it's illegal for a convicted felon, which Ephraim was at the time because he had already pled guilty, to be in possession of a firearm, to be holding a firearm, right? And it's also illegal for the agent to hand him a firearm. So what does he do? Pops open the trunk, and he's like, hey, Ephraim, check out that gun over there. It's the latest handgun on the market. It's the coolest thing, blah, blah, blah. And he knows Ephraim's a gun nut. Ephraim is like, oh, I heard about that thing. I've always wanted to check it out. He reaches into the trunk, picks up the gun. He's like, what can I say? Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Am I right? And the agent slaps cuffs on him. He's like, you're a felon in possession of a firearm. And
so just holding it?
Just holding it. You can get up to 10 years in prison for that.
Damn.
That's a convicted felon. So Ephraim had already pled guilty for the fraud charge, which they had reduced it to 1 count as well. So he could get up to 5 years for that. And then he could get 10 years for the gun charge. So he could have gotten a total of 15 years. But he hired the best lawyers in Miami, spent millions of dollars on them, and eventually negotiated it down to 4 years. So he ended up doing, I think he ended up doing 3.5 years in prison because he got like some time off for doing like a drug rehab program.
Well, by the time the dust settled, AEY made 85 deliveries of munitions to Afghanistan worth more than $66 million.
Right.
And you guys had another $100 million in orders that you didn't fill.
Right.
So after everything was done, you got house arrest.
Yeah.
Ephraim got 4 years, 3.5 years.
Sure.
And between the fines and penalties, it was $1 million.
Actually, I think he only paid about $350,000 in penalties.
That's nothing.
I
mean, comparatively.
Yeah, comparatively.
I mean, to an average working person, that's a lot of money. But when you guys have a $300 million contract.
Well, he made He made about $15 million from the contract.
$15 million off the contract.
Yeah.
You pay $300,000?
Yeah, well, it's because when it's a fraud case, the way it works is you get your criminal penalty or like punishment, prison, whatever. But for financial penalties, it's based on the loss to the victim. And in this case, the victim did not lose any money, right? Because in fact, they saved a lot of money because we were by far the cheapest supplier. The only thing we defrauded them out of was that the requirement that the ammunition not be of Chinese origin. And that did not have any financial loss. So they couldn't claim that there was any financial loss to the victim. So the only financial loss they were able to claim was the cost of taking the contract and finding a new supplier for it. And that's what they claimed cost them like $350,000, and Ephraim had to pay that.
Well, you do house arrest. He does 3.5 years.
Yeah.
What year does he actually get out?
I think he got out, I think it was like in late 2015 or early 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever meet up again?
Yeah, I sued him for the money he owed me.
Okay.
I think it was in 2018 or 19. So I saw him in a deposition. That was the last time I saw him.
How much did you sue him for?
Well, he owed me $5 million, but there was some of the evidence that I needed was conveniently lost. And at the time, I didn't have enough money to pay the lawyers I needed to pay to go all the way through trial. And I also knew that he had hidden most of his money overseas in overseas bank accounts. So even if I won, it would be hard to collect. So I ended up settling with him for a small fraction of what he owed me.
Do you say how much?
I'd rather not say.
Okay.
It's too painful.
Well, right around that time in 2016, the movie War Dogs was released.
Yes.
Did they work with you on that movie?
Yeah, so they wanted to advertise it as based on a true story. So they wanted at least to have some of the people involved cooperating with them. So they bought my life rights, they call it, and gave me a bit of money, not nearly as much as Miles Teller, the guy pretending to be me, got. I'll tell you that. He got a lot more money pretending to be me than I got for being me.
Yeah,
but that's Hollywood. That's Hollywood.
Yeah.
And the screenwriter Stephen Chin flew into Miami and spent about a week with me, interviewed me. I told him all the stories, showed him all the emails, all that stuff. He recorded everything and based the first version of the screenplay on his interviews with me. So that was my involvement. They also had me do a very short cameo in the movie. I'm playing guitar and singing in the scene where Miles Teller, playing me, is selling bed sheets in a nursing home. So I'm the guy playing guitar and singing in that scene. So I have about 3 seconds of screen time. So I'm officially SAG-AFTRA. I'm part of the Screen Actors Guild because of that 3 seconds.
Well, was Ephraim involved in making the film?
He was not. So he was actually in prison while they were filming.
Oh.
And they didn't want him to be involved anyway because he's a well-known pathological liar and a very difficult person to work with in general. So they didn't want him involved, and they didn't need him. Yeah.
When the movie came out, what'd you think?
I actually thought it was very, very good. Now, I may be a little biased.
A little bit.
A little bit. But to be honest, when I first heard... So the director of War Dogs, before he made War Dogs, he made the Hangover movies.
Right.
And I thought that he was going to make another movie like the Hangover movies, where I would wake up, from a drug-induced haze next to a tiger in Vegas or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to make me look like a total idiot. And so I thought that was going to be like that kind of movie, but he used War Dogs to kind of go from comedy to drama. After War Dogs, he made Joker. So War Dogs was his... ironically, Joker is not very funny. It's very dramatic. Not many jokes in Joker. But he used War Dogs as a transition movie from comedy to drama. So they call War Dogs a dramedy, right? It's like a kind of half comedy, half drama. So I thought it was a good balance, and it was a really well done movie. I was actually very happy with how they did it. I mean, they gave me a full head of hair in the movie. Well, I have no complaints.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cover kind of It's almost an homage to the Scarface cover.
Yes. They did that on purpose because in the movie they have Ephraim being a big fan of Scarface. In real life, he wasn't really. He was actually a big fan of Lord of War with Nicolas Cage. But in fact, for his birthday, I bought him a big poster of Nicolas Cage in Lord of War, the one where he's like made out of ammunition. His face is made out of ammo. And he put that up behind his desk in his office. But Todd Phillips, the director of Hangover, and War Dogs, he didn't want to reference Lord of War in the movie because it was too close to War Dogs. So he decided to change it to Scarface being the reference, and because that's more of like a classic gangster movie, and so that's why he used that as a reference.
Well, Ephraim actually sued the movie?
Yeah, he sued Warner Brothers, yeah.
How did that go?
So he claimed that they stole his story from. So while he was in prison, he wrote a book called Once a Gun Runner, based on the line that he said right before the undercover ATF agent arrested him. Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. So he wrote a book, like a memoir in prison. I actually met his ghostwriter, a guy named Matt Cox. Matt Cox now has a pretty popular podcast called Inside True Crime.
I've interviewed Matt Cox before.
Oh, you have? Oh, okay, cool. So you know Matt.
Yeah.
So
Matt was what was his thing? A counterfeiter?
Yeah, he was a mortgage fraudster.
Mortgage fraud. Okay, there we go.
He did mortgage fraud.
Yeah, he did mortgage fraud.
Yeah. So Matt, as you know, he got like a 25-year sentence or something for mortgage fraud, and he was in prison with Ephraim, and he was writing Ephraim's memoir for him. And now it turned out that Ephraim wasn't really interested in promoting the memoir to sell the book for its own sake. He wanted to come out with that book before the movie came out so that he could sue Warner Brothers for stealing his story. Right? Now, Matt told me this later, and actually Matt wrote a book about his experience writing Ephraim's memoir and the fallout. Because Ephraim, of course, ended up screwing Matt out of all the money that he promised Matt for writing the book. Of course, Ephraim would screw the author who's writing the book about how he screwed everyone else out of. So Matt told me that while he was writing Ephraim's book, Ephraim was telling him about all these. Ephraim was very proud of like how he screwed over different people. Like he's like, oh yeah, and then I screwed over this guy in this way, because he's very creative. He was very sneaky in all the ways he did things. And he got away with a lot. He's still getting away with it. So he's actually very talented at screwing people over. So Ephraim was really proud of like how he screwed over various people. He's telling Matt all these stories about how he screwed over this guy and that guy and that guy. And Matt tells him, he's like, Ephraim, you can't just keep on burning all your bridges, man. And Ephraim looks at him and he's like, Matt, there's a lot of bridges out there. And Matt told me, and that's the moment I knew that I was going to get screwed too. And he did. Of course, Matt got screwed by Ephraim. So anyway, Matt wrote a whole book called Dude, Where's My Hand Grenade? It's on Amazon. You could check it out. It's actually a pretty entertaining book about his experience writing Ephraim's memoir and the whole fallout, and how Ephraim tried to screw Warner Brothers, pretty much tried to defraud Warner Brothers in a whole bunch of different creative ways. And so Ephraim was trying to get his book out before the movie came out, but it was not ready. Matt was not ready to with the book. And Ephraim was like, yeah, but we need to get it out. We need to get it out. He's like, why don't you? Because he had known that Matt had written a novel that he had never published called Stranger Danger. And it was about like I think it was like about a pedophile or something. And he's like, why don't you take some of that book and just change, the names in the story of the story and just combine it with the memoir so you have enough material to publish the book. So literally half of Ephraim's memoir, according to Matt, who is the author, was taken directly from his completely fictional novel about some pedophile, and that what became his book, Once a Gun Runner. Now, obviously, I read his book, and it's actually really funny. He like changes like the parts that are based at all on any true event. He completely changes everything around to make me look as bad as possible and him to look as good as possible. But I mean, I expected that. So it's It's a semi-entertaining book. The thing that I found most entertaining is that, like, right in the beginning of the book, he describes himself. He supposedly wrote this himself. I don't think he gives credit to Matt. But he wrote, in the intro, he describes himself as being handsome by anyone's standards. Yeah, he just can't, he has no subtlety. So, and he also claims like that like prostitutes he slept with fell in love with him and refused his money. It was just hilarious. So yeah, he came out with this book, and then he claimed Warner Brothers stole his story. He sued them before the movie was released. So when the movie came out, it was very obvious that it had almost zero resemblance to his book. And so he had to change the lawsuit for suing them. And it was really creative. I have to give him this. He's very creative in these things. He sued them for falsely advertising that it was based on a true story because his book was the true story and it was completely different from the movie. So first he sued them for stealing his story, and then it turned out that they didn't steal the story, so he sued them for falsely advertising that it's true because his is the true story, even though his is as far from the true story as it could be, but according to the author of his book. So yeah, it's just hilarious. And I think eventually, I don't think they ended up, if they did settle with him, it was for something very, very small. Because he had made a real enemy out of Matt, and Matt pretty much torpedoed his entire lawsuit by telling everyone that that his story is obviously not anything to do with the truth, because he had taken it from his own novel that he was a complete work of fiction, and that was like most of his book. So yeah, so he failed in that.
Well, you end up co-founding War Dogs Academy.
Yes.
Which is an online school that teaches people how to start a government contracting business.
Yes.
So how successful has that been?
It's been amazing, actually. Okay. So I just started it about a year ago. So ever since the movie came out in 2016, so quite a while ago. And at the time, up until now, so just to give a little bit of context, while I was under house arrest, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and I was completely broke. And I was playing a lot of guitar, and my musician friends would come over, and we would jam, but like no drummer was gonna come over with his drum set because it's a big pain in the butt to move. So I bought a drum machine, which is this tabletop electronic device, which you can make beats on, and I would play along to that. But like every time you want the beat to change, I would have to like stop playing my guitar and press a button on the machine to change the beat. And it was really annoying. So I figured I need a drum machine in the form of a pedal on the floor so I could operate it with my foot. And nobody was making anything like it. So I decided to make it myself. Found an engineering team to build it, and I got a patent on it, and it's been extremely successful. I've sold many millions of dollars worth of it. It's called the Beat Buddy, like your buddy that plays the beat. And that was the beginning of my current company, Singular Sound. I've made many other products in the music space for musicians. It's been super successful and very fulfilling. I've met some of my musical idols who've used my products to make their music. So it's super, super cool. And that was like my life for like the past 10 years or so. And ever since the movie came out, I've had a lot of people asking me to teach them how to do government contracting, because that's kind of what I got famous for. And I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I mean, I was banned from doing government contracting for about 15 years, so I wasn't doing it myself. I was busy with my company, Singular Sound, making music equipment. I also made a product with my brother called InstaFloss that flosses all your teeth for you in 10 seconds. Check it out, instafloss.com. Very cool. And so I was busy inventing things, creating these products, running my company, and I didn't want to have anything to do with government contracting. I've been so burned. I was like almost emotionally scarred. I would say I have a bit of emotional scarring surrounding government contracting, so I didn't want to get involved with it. But I had literally hundreds of people messaging me on Instagram and Twitter, asking me like, please help me learn this. It is a bit complicated to learn. It's got a lot of nitty-gritty details that you really have to get right in order to be successful doing it. So about a year and a half ago, I got a message, I think it was on Instagram, from these two guys, a guy named Logan and James. And they told me, they're like, hey, just wanted you to know we're 28 years old now. When we were 21, about 7 years ago, we were dead broke. we're Americans. We were like traveling through Thailand. We ran out of money. We wanted to make some money. So we went to a farm in Australia because we heard that they paid well. And we were working like our asses off, picking bananas from sunrise until sunset. And one day the farm had a movie night and they showed War Dogs. And we thought, man, these guys are our age in the movie. If they can do it, why can't we do it? And they got obsessed with government contracting. They taught themselves the business. They had a lot of failures. They went back and forth. They made a lot of mistakes. But over a couple years, they finally figured out the business. And nowadays, 7 years later, they have a multi-million-dollar government contracting business. They ended up specializing in laundry services, not like weapons or anything like that. So they provide laundry services to military bases all around the world. They're making millions of dollars. They're doing really, really well. And they just reached out to me to say thank you, for the inspiration. If it wasn't for War Dogs, we would have never been where we are today. And so we just wanted to say thank you, and it's super cool, movie, And so I thought, man, these guys taught themselves the business, which is not an easy thing to do. I had Ephraim to teach me. He had his uncle. It took him a few years to for them to really get their groove in, but they actually taught themselves the business, and they're very successful with it. So I said, hey guys, I have all these people asking me to teach them how to do government contracting. I haven't done it in like 10, 15 years. Why don't we start something together to teach people? Because this is not something that is very well known. Very few people know about government contracting, even though it's literally trillions of dollars a year. It is the biggest customer in the entire world, the federal government. So they thought it was an amazing idea. And so together, between the three of us, we put together an online course. And we also have a forum, like a private community, where everyone who joins the academy can talk to each other and make business connections. And we also have in-house experts, government contracting experts. We actually hired some retired government contracting officers. So the people who used to work for the government deciding who wins the contracts, they work for us now, and they help our students with any questions they have. They can look over their contracts to make sure that they're doing things correctly. And in the last year, we have had, I think we're up to $14 million in wins for our students. So it's been amazing. Some of them have become multimillionaires already in just less than a year. Wow. It's been super inspiring, and that we've been able to change like people's lives. And some of the stories are just amazing. Like some of our students were, like us, like we were dead broke, having no idea what they're going to do with their lives. And now they're on course to make millions of dollars. So it's been super, super gratifying that I turned my disaster of an experience in government contracting into an inspiration for other people and really changing people's lives.
Well, David, crazy story.
Yeah,
I watched War Dogs when it came out.
Yeah.
Great movie. I never thought at one point I'd be actually interviewing one of the guys in it. You guys did it at the highest level.
Yeah.
You guys were getting $300 million contracts. You were sending millions of rounds of ammunition overseas, dealing with arms dealers all around the world. This is really a very crazy story.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you didn't make a lot of money, but you also didn't do a bunch of jail time.
And that was worth it.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled with how it turned out, exactly. I have to say.
You could end up doing 20, 30 years. Because in fact, remember there was the whole thing.
Yeah.
Remember Russia did a prisoner exchange?
Yes.
With the merchant of death?
Yeah, Victor Bout,
Yeah, you know who this guy is.
Yeah. He was actually the guy they based Lord of War on.
over, exactly. Yeah. And they did a swap with Brittany Griner?
Yes, correct.
That was a big deal. Like, you could have ended up like that guy.
I could have.
Right? You guys are doing similar stuff.
Yeah.
But not to say that you were doing as crazy as that guy, but still... You're in the same ballpark.
Right.
Same building.
Yeah.
That could have been you doing 20, 30, 50 years.
It could have been. And nobody would have done a prisoner exchange for me because I would have been in an American prison.
Exactly. You would have been right there in prison, in federal prison. So congratulations on making it out. Congratulations on the academy. That's very dope. the fact that someone, because this is a very secretive kind of business. I'm sure that people in general don't like to share this information.
Yes, correct.
But you guys actually created, and I had something similar. I have the Vlad TV YouTube Masterclass.
Oh, awesome.
Where, I've been doing this for 18 years, and I teach people how to actually build a channel and make it successful and make it profitable and so forth. So a lot is to be said about sharing the information once you get it.
Absolutely. It's worth every penny to be able to skip all the mistakes you're going to make if you do it on your own. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, David, man, I appreciate you coming in.
My
Until
pleasure.
next time. Peace.
Thank you.